The next talk in this session is going to be given by Abhimat from UCLA, and it's Discovery of a Candidate Old Ellipsoidal Binary System at the Milky Way Galaxy Center and Dynamical Constraints on a Dark Cusp. So when you're ready, Abhimat.
Sure, thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me now. Hello, my name is Abhimat Gautam. I'm a postdoc at UCLA working with the Galactic Center group. Today I'll be talking about my research project studying a newly discovered candidate old stellar binary system at the Milky Way Galactic Center and the valuable dynamical constraints that it can give us about the Galactic Center environment. So to start with some brief background, near-infrared astrometry and radial velocity data with large ground-based telescopes using adaptive optics have revealed a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. By tracking stellar orbits, we can measure the mass and the distance to the galactic center black hole. And shown here on the slide is recent work by Doe et al. 2019, fitting the orbit of the star S02 as it made its closest approach to the black hole in 2018. And by measuring the orbit, we found that the galactic center black hole has a mass of about 4 million solar masses, and it's at a distance of about 8 kiloparsecs. So this mass estimate is important because mass is sort of on the low end of what we observe for central black holes in other galaxies, and that has important dynamical consequences. So one important consequence of the low mass of the black hole is that the lower black hole mass you have, the lower the dynamical relaxation time that you expect for a stellar cluster that lives around the central black hole. So from dynamical models, we expect that relaxed populations, if they exist around a central black hole that periodically eats stars, they should exhibit a steep increase in stellar density towards the center. And if we model the density as a power law, the exponents on the right side of the slide are what we end up expecting in this power law. This steep increase in density from the power law is called the density cusp. So in particular, we expect that there are two populations at the galactic center that should be dynamically relaxed and exhibit the steep density cusp. And one is a population of late-type stars that have ages of about 1 to 10 gigayears. And because of their old ages, we expect that they should have dynamically relaxed around the black hole. And another population is stellar remnants like stellar mass black holes or neutron stars. And these, we expect that they should also have dynamically relaxed and subsequently formed a cusp distribution. However, observationally, when we trace the populations of known old stars at the galactic center, we don't actually find strong evidence for such a cusp. And studying proper motion and radial velocity of known old stars, Doe et al. 2013 found a flat profile that is inconsistent with the cusp. And then more recent work by Gallego Cano et al. 2018, they did find a radial density profile consistent with the cusp, but their sample is likely contaminated with young stars that haven't yet dynamically relaxed. So overall, what observations find is that there's a lack of old stars as would be expected near the black hole by dynamical models. And the other possibility of a cusp is the so-called dark cusp. And these are the stellar remnants that were created from recent episodes of star formation at the galactic center, and they've sunk in towards a supermassive black hole. We expect about 10,000 stellar mass black holes in the central parsec of the galactic center, each with orders on individual masses on the order of 10 solar masses. And we expect that these black holes formed a cusp. And importantly, we expect that this cusp still should survive because they're not subject to the same effects that we expect for the red giants, old giants. So we want to observationally investigate if this dark cusp actually exists, but this is actually kind of tricky, and because the main reason is that this dark cusp is dark. So recent observations in X-ray of quiescent X-ray binaries at further distances do suggest a cusp, as is shown in this work by Haley et al. 2018. But this study didn't look close to the central black hole within the central 0.2 parsecs. So their constraints are limited. So we need another way to examine at close distances to the black hole. So this other way that we're looking at in our work is something called binary evaporation. The idea is if you have a loosely bound binary system, over time, gravitational dynamical interactions with surrounding members loosen it up. And eventually, if there are enough of these interactions, you expect the binary system evaporates, meaning the two stars in the binary separate from each other. And this evaporation process happens more easily if you have more loosely bound binaries, or if you have older binaries, or if you have really high density of surrounding stars and massive objects. So if a binary has survived all of these things, it can place an upper limit on how many massive objects there are around it. So this idea has been applied at the galactic center, but the binaries known so far at the galactic center are young and massive binaries, and they don't give too strong constraints on the dark cusp. Instead, we can get much tighter constraints on the dark cusp from old loosely bound binaries, but none have been found so far. And this is where my work comes in. So in a previous photometric variability study done with over 11 years of Keck imaging data presented in Gautam et al. 2019, I identified a new periodic variable at the galactic center that may be one of these old binaries. And this is located just over 2 arc seconds from the location of the black hole at Sagittarius star shown on the slide. And that translates to about 0.08 parsecs at the galactic center in projected distance. In that study, we suggested the periodic variability might be originating from an old stellar binary, but more work was necessary in order to confirm that hypothesis. And that's exactly what we've done since then. So there can be several types of periodic variability at this period. And to figure out if this is indeed a binary, we've since taken more imaging data with Keck. In particular, what has been the most helpful has been photometry at other near-infrared bands. And why that's important is that with multi-band photometry, we can get near-infrared H minus K color and near-infrared flux for the star. And that can let us test for consistency with known classes of periodic variability. And when we do that, from the color and flux measurements, we can get estimates for the distance under different hypotheses, an estimate for the extinction, and expected apparent magnitude. And out of all of these different classes that can exist at this period, we found that the class that is most consistent with our observations are something called red giant ellipsoidal binaries. And these are shown in dark orange in these plots. So what is an ellipsoidal binary? Ellipsoidal binaries consist of a late type giant star that is being tidally distorted by an orbiting companion. So that's shown in this cartoon that I've drawn on this slide. And shown below is one of the binary models that I've made to help model the light curve that we observe for this star. In both K-band and H-band. So I built a software framework to model this binary system in order to observationally constrain the binary and stellar parameters. In our best fit models, we find that the models consist of 2 evolved red giant stars, each of about a solar mass, and the separation is about 0.4 AU. And with our photometry alone, we can't get a tight constraint on the age, but we find that it's likely between about 3 and 13.5 gigayears. So with that, this is the first old stellar binary system candidate at the galactic center. And this is very exciting, not just on its own, because if we assume that it's lived its entire life where we see it today and apply the binary evaporation idea to it, it lets us get the tightest observational constraint so far on the number of dark cusp members close to the supermassive black hole in the galactic center. So what this plot shows on the horizontal axis is distance from the supermassive black hole, and on the vertical axis is the number of 10 solar mass objects, roughly the expected mass of stellar mass black holes that would make up the predicted dark cusp. And in the colored lines are the constraints that I derived binary, with orange being the youngest ages possible and red being the oldest ages possible. And the 2 sets of bands on the slide are just showing the most conservative estimates and the tightest constraints that we can get. And the truth is like middle. So what we conclude is basically that we can expect that there are fewer than about 10 to the 4 stellar mass black holes within about 0.1 parsecs of Sagittarius star. So, which is very exciting because these are very tight limits on the environment close to the central black hole. So with that, I'll just leave up my summary slide and I can take questions.
Thank you very much. Shelley, would you unmute Marie? We have one question coming from the audience. Go ahead, Marie.
She's unmuted now.
While we're waiting for her, we've got a question on Q&A. Is that limit surprising to you?
It's not surprising. It's just that this is a limit that hasn't been really possible before. What I didn't get to talk too much about in my presentation, this gray line is the lower limit that that's expected from X-ray observations. And these are constraints that are coming out from larger distances, but if we project them inwards, these are the constraints that we expect. So what's exciting is that this can, if we combine both of these things, our observations can give us upper limits while these X-ray observations can give us lower limits, and we can sort of sandwich what the expectation is. And this is really interesting because these are sort of some of the first tight constraints that we can get on the actual number.
So we have someone with their hand up if they'd like to unmute themselves and ask the question. Perhaps perhaps we're having problems with our audio. So we'll put that question into the Slack, and we'll move to the next speaker. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting.